We have already noted that in the first and most important conception in Marxist ideology, as far as the introduction to the basic Marxist ideas is concerned, the basic conception relates to human consciousness, which we can also call the sense of self. Marxism differs from conventional schools of thought and traditional philosophy in believing that uh, human consciousness or the sense of self is not autonomous, it is not free. It is tantamount to saying that our consciousness or our sense of self is formed by the kind of life we live and the kind of surroundings that exist around us. Now, this is opposed to the traditional belief system where there was the notion of timelessness and a priori nature of human consciousness. Moreover, it was believed that consciousness is free, that human beings live their life uh, with or with the help of free choices. So here we can sum up this point by saying that Marxism does not subscribe to the idea that human consciousness or the ideas which emanate from human consciousness have a transcendental nature. Now, we can go to the next point from here by asserting that in Marxist system of thought or in Marxist paradigm and framework, there is very clearly a marked distrust of social cultural institutions, particularly religion, because religion happened to be the most powerful institution in the social life of societies and communities. Now, Marxism expresses its distrust of, uh, of ideological apparatus, particularly as it gets manifested in religions. So, we see that in Marxism, there is very little reliance on the divine. It means Marxism does not show any need to rely on such systems uh, which are divine. It does not rely on religious philosophies to explain life. We can logically extend it to say that Marxism does not seem to see life as a teleological and a preordained system, a grand plan made by supernatural agencies according to which man's life progresses or according to which social life progresses. So it is quite clear that in this new framework, there is very little reliance on religion to explain the meaning of life. Meaning of life is explained in relation to what I have already pointed out and which can be explained as the material conditions, the historical conditions, and the economic structure of the society. Now, if I give you an example of reliance on religion for explaining the meaning of life, we can take a very good example of Oedipus Rex, where there is an epidemic, a pestilence, and the king straightway sends his emissary, sends his messenger to the oracle to find out the reason for the outbreak of the epidemic. And it is through the help of the oracle, the, the messenger of God, that the that the problem, the crisis gets resolved. So Marxism would have a very clear disagreement with this kind of literature. It would treat this kind of literature as something that upholds not only religion but a false consciousness, where rather than uh, rather than relying on history, rather than relying on the ground level realities to understand life, extraneous forces are invoked to understand life. So here you can, with the help of this example, uh, construe the basics of Marxist framework of thought or Marxist ideology. Uh, Going ahead, another very central issue in Marxism is the view of history. I have already pointed out that Marxism takes a conflictual view of history. Uh, First of all, it says that human consciousness is not autonomous, it is not free, it is not a process of untrammeled motivation and free choices, which is which constitutes the substance of life. Rather, life is determined by arbitrary factors related to the ground level realities and history. Now, in its next important contention, Marxism takes a conflictual view of history, that uh, the history of human societies is not a harmonious phenomenon. It is not, it cannot be understood in line with the humanist ideology, where human beings repose faith in such things as peace, sympathy, love, and harmony. Rather, it is believed that society is divided into those who control the material resources and the wealth of the society, and those who we can see as dispossessed and wretched. It is these two sections of the society are engaged in a constant competition for material resources. And it is this constant competition between these two sections of the society which constitutes history. And uh, this, this, according to Marxist framework, this opposition, this dialectical relationship between opposing forces is the substance of history. And it is a cyclic process where the opposition gets resolved and then gets recreated. As far as the view of in classical Marxism about ideological apparatus, social and cultural institutions is concerned, we can link it with one of the basic tenets of Marxism, where it is said that every society reproduces material means to sustain life and at the same time reproduces ideas to sustain the social relations. So this tantamounts to saying that cultural phenomena, ideological status, religion, social and cultural institutions, all of them play a role in preventing change and in maintaining what we call status quo. There is, there is I will come to a very important point after this. There is, let me conclude this part by saying that there is at social and cultural levels a fear of change, and there is a program to keep things as they are, to age one age after the other. The rich, the people who control the resources and wealth remain in the dominant position, and the dispossessed and the wretched remain like that. So we can say that the cultural phenomena, ideological apparatus, social and cultural institutions can be equated with the ideas of the dominant classes. They are the idea of the dominant. They are a manifestation of the ideas of the dominant class. And all these agencies are used to prevent change. And I will come to this point later on. Marxism is an ideology of change which aims to uncover the inconsistencies, the iniquities, the divisions, the fissures of society. Now, the next thing which is said is that in the relationship between the two opposing forces or two opposing sections in the society, the dominant group uses coercion, that is brute force, to establish its control and domination over those who are weaker. But the story does not end here. There is an ideological phenomena in place, apparatus in place, which produces, as I have said, constantly produces ideas which make the weaker sections passive, submissive, and make them accept the conditions of life and the social relations as they have continued in the same way as they have continued to exist for ages. Now, I have already stated that as opposed to humanism, Marxism is an ideology of change, and it aims to uncover the inconsistencies, the contradictions, the divisions, the fissures of the society. And these three things are very important to make sense of the basic ideas related to classical Marxism. It is alternatively also known as dogmatic Marxism or even vulgar Marxism. Now, going ahead, because the most important works of Marx and Engels came out in the middle of the 19th century when the capitalist order had been established and when the industrialized economic setup was quite extensively in place in most of particularly in Europe. And the system of money economy had also come into existence. Now, with the emergence of the capitalist society, with the setting up of the industrialized system of mass production and the emergence of the money economy, the basic opposition in the society gets replicated in the form of the emergence of the bourgeois, the capitalist class, the money-owning class, or the class that owns the means of production, and the proletariat or the workers who do not own the means of production and who work as the labor force in this new system of production. Now, the basic problem in this society, in this system of production, which leads to inequalities, is that whereas workers have a very high use value because they add value to raw material by turning it into finished products, they have very little exchange value. And in the money economy, use value, we can say, is replaced by exchange value. Things are not, the value of things is not estimated in relation to their use. Rather, it is estimated in relation to how much money we can get in exchange for that particular thing or that commodity. Now, labor is a commodity in this new system of production, which has a very high use value but very little exchange value. This is because the capitalist class is extremely powerful and denies the uh, the the proletariat the legitimate right to a high exchange value. So again, you have a very clear opposition between two sections, two forces. It is a class-based society that is conceived in Marxism. In this class-based society, again, there is a dialectical unfolding of history, and because of the opposing interests of the bourgeois and the proletariat. Now, the as I have said, the proletariat is denied the the right, or they, because of the extremely powerful position of the capitalist class, the money owning class, the class that owns the means of production, the proletariat is exploited because they do not get the their uh, right to the you know exchange value which they deserve, and the surplus or the profit which is uh, which is uh, monopolized by the capitalists is understood as the unremunerated value that is created by labor. Now, this leads to social and economic inequalities, and Marxism conceives of a class struggle where the proletariat uh, are made conscious of these contradictions in the capitalist system, and they collectively struggle for an equal